All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing today? All righty. I love how we have a packed house today, both in person, and we also have so many friends and colleagues who are joining us virtually. So if you are here today for this incredible event of Tracing the Legacy, Black Farmers and the Fight for Equity, you are in the right place. I am so excited to roll out this incredible series, really highlighting some of the most intricate in critical conversations during this time and as we are moving forward. My name is Dr. Maya Price, and I am an assistant professor with the Global Food Institute here at the George Washington University. So it is my honor to be here with you today and to help to navigate and moderate this very critical and important conversation. Before we get started today, I do want us to ground ourselves in what we will hear, what will be shared. And before we get started today, I do want to acknowledge where we are today in time and have a fellow and my amazing colleague, Dr. Wendy Ellis with the Equity Institute here at the George Washington University, really elevate us and center us in this conversation. As Dr. Wendy Ellis makes her way to the front here, Dr. Wendy Ellis is an incredible assistant professor in global health and is the founding director of the Center for Community Resilience at the Milken Institute School of Public Health here at GW. She is amazing, phenomenal to work with. And when we talk about social justice and equity and so many of the moving research in times of movements as it relates to race, ethnic, socioeconomic inequities worldwide, Dr. Wendy Ellis is definitely leading the way. So without further ado, I want to welcome Dr. Wendy Ellis.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. As Dr. Price mentioned, as the director of the Institute for Racial, Ethnic, and Socioeconomic Equity, it is our mission to lead the translation of research to action for measurable change. This means that we remain laser focused on the removal of systemic, structural, and practice barriers that produce unequal and unjust outcomes in health, wealth, and well-being. Today's conversation will lift the stories behind the numbers, highlighting both the history of and the hope for Black farming in the United States. Farming is a sacred art, sacred to humanity, because without it, we cannot sustain life. Mesopotamia is considered the cradle of civilization because of the development of writing, law, and advances in agriculture. It was when we moved from a nomadic existence to an organized agrarian society that humankind began to flourish. We owe civilization as we know it to those who till the land and harvest the bounty. Here in the United States, the contributions of indigenous and Black farming have been largely erased by policies and practices that led to the extermination and removal of millions of Native Americans who lived off this land for centuries before the first colonists arrived more than 500 years ago. They were quickly replaced by African slaves who brought with them novel crops such as rice, okra, and kidney beans, and other seeds that quickly shaped the American diet. With these seeds, they used their knowledge of farming to reap a bounty that fed the new nation and the economy. Much like Mesopotamia, the African farmers provided the infrastructure to sustain and build a new society. This may sound like a novel take on the role of Black farming in this nation because our history has erased the engineering, expertise, and wisdom it took to turn the swamps of South Carolina, for example, into one of the strongest economies in the world. In low country, rice was currency. Without Black farming, ports in Charleston and Savannah may have never prospered. The narrative about Black farming is intertwined with a strange and cruel practice of slavery and human bondage. A bondage that continued in new and creative forms well after emancipation. In 1910, less than 50 years following emancipation and the promise of 40 acres and a mule, Black farmers owned between 15 and 16 million acres of land, representing 14% of the nation's farming. Today, Black farmers own less than 1%. That's equivalent to just 33,000 farms and ranches, totaling 5.3 million acres. There are narratives that would have you believe that this sharp reduction is due to an inherent inability of Black farmers. They lack the intellect and knowledge to run a farm-based business. There are other narratives that the reduction of Black-owned farming is due to financial mismanagement, including failing to pay on loans, which closes doors to much-needed lines of credit to prepare for the next season's harvest. But these narratives are crafted to explain the outcomes that are associated with intentional policies and practices that have been put in place to deprive Black farmers the ability to acquire and maintain land and pass on knowledge and wealth to the next generation. Whether it is the legacy of sharecropping that forced many Black farmers to toil for pennies on the dollar on the same land that their ancestors were once enslaved, or those who lost their land due to predatory policies, particularly in the South. Many Black farmers continue to lack access to farm subsidies that white farmers have come to expect to maintain their family farms from season to season and generation to generation. The story of the Black farmer is a clear example and a clear result of systemic inequity. One that is reinforced by policy such as farm subsidies that limit crops, that are limited to crops, but Black farmers are more likely to produce livestock. Reinforced by narratives that point blame at the Black farmer to distract from the obvious inequities produced by lack of access to credit to keep their farms afloat. Reinforced by practices such as the early farm loan programs that excluded Black farmers from federal aid during the Depression, but gave benefits to white farmers who used Black farmers to sharecrop their land. Today's discussion matters not just for history's sake. Today's discussion matters because we have an opportunity to bring forth a renaissance of Black farming. The food sovereignty movement with the Black farming movement comes at a time of rising food insecurity in minoritized communities across the nation. The desire to rely on more natural and holistic methods of farming is gaining traction as more families seek food sources closer to home and with less chemicals and pesticides. In the face of climate change, American farming will necessarily have to change both in crop selection and practice. An adaptability and wisdom that is rooted in Indigenous and Black farming will become increasingly valuable for farming writ large in America. Unearthing and celebrating the legacy and contributions of the Black farmer provide an opportunity to honor the past. It also creates an opportunity to highlight solutions and a pathway forward to ensure that Black farming is protected, nurtured to reap a bounty for generations to come. This is why equity matters for the Black farmers, to provide the descendants of those who planted the first seeds that fed a nation to be nourished with a proper seat at America's farming table.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wendy Ellis. And those words are going to stick with us and live through us, especially throughout this conversation today. And to also ground us, I know storytelling and stories is so critical as part of this conversation. And when we think about the stories of Black farmers, when we think about the stories and histories of what is happening today, storytelling is part of that. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started. And you may recognize someone um, in this video.
When we look at 1920, there were 16 million acres of land. And present day, you look at there's only 2 million acres of Black-owned land in the country. That's 14 million acres of land that has just disappeared from the Black agricultural community.
Black farmland lost in that 75-year period or so was worth $326 billion.
Think about all of the wealth that has been extracted from these families.
Land was something that freed us and offered opportunity for us and our children to have something of our very own, to enjoy something that would last for generations.
Black people need space. They understand the legacy.
We got here, we didn't have nothing. Every time we gain something, there's been a reaction to it.
Where do you go when you lose your land? This is something you put everything you had, and in spite of everything you did, it's gone.
I would hear people talking about going back to their land.
I thought, how can we engage in a way that actually makes a difference? So let's engage the Thurgood Marshall College Fund to engage Black law schools to get interns, to then go work for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives, helping Black folks keep title to the land that they have or get good title.
I've heard the stories throughout the years, the things that my family had overcome, how we lost land. I want to invest the same time that I did in getting my education and passing it on to my kids one day.
We need to shift this idea about what it means even to have our hands in the soil.
This represents history. This is a part of family reunions. This land represents all that's good about our family.
Land represents generational wealth. You can have that land and pass it on to your children. You're creating a reciprocating type of monetary payment to that family. But if you don't have that land structured right, you will not benefit from it.
All righty. So I say we dive right into it. Today, we have such an incredible panel. And, you know, I am truly honored to be sitting next to each and every one up here on the panel. And so I am not going to introduce them. I would love for them to introduce themselves, but panel, to really begin today's conversation, I'd like to invite each of you to introduce yourselves, not just your title or organization, but through the lens of lived experience. What is a moment from your life or lineage that called you to this work? What continues to anchor you in your purpose and commitment to community, food, and land? So we'll get started with you, Dr. Jules.
Well, hear me. I don't know if my mic's on. Can you hear me now? Well, good afternoon, and Dr. Price, thank you so much for having us and hosting this panel today. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Bronaugh. I am the president and CEO of the 1890 Universities Foundation, proudly representing our 19 HBCU land-grant institutions. I hail not very far from Petersburg, Virginia. And I always said if I had known I would have a career in agriculture, I would have majored in agriculture. I did not. I come from a family of educators. And I just think about my connection. I did not grow up on a farm, and I wish I had also, but I have uncles who grew row crops, and being from the Southside Virginia area, tobacco production was huge, and I spent time at their farms enjoying myself. It wasn't until I started a career at Virginia State University as a 4-H extension specialist that the bug hit me. Not soon after I started in that work, which I loved, I'm like, I have landed in the right place. This is my kind of work. I had a coworker who said, would you like to go and visit a farm? And I said, sure. You know, I was just learning my job. It sounded like fun to me. So, you know, we drive out to southeastern part of Virginia, and we land on a farm, Black farmers, husband and wife. And I remember it was such a gorgeous day that day, and the smell in the air. I looked at this farmer's crops. They were absolutely gorgeous. It was like, felt like magic to me when I got out, and I was dressed like this. And I remember the gentleman saying, where are you going with them high heel shoes on? And he said, Mabel, get her some boots, because this woman needs some boots because she can't walk around in those shoes. And I was like, I love this guy. I love this guy. It just felt, Matt, it was the warmth that I felt. It was the beauty that I saw. It was the pride in that farm. It was just the overall way that it made me feel. You could see the contribution, the pride, the respect on this family. And I was bitten. And not there long after, I had a chance to go to the Haynie family farm. And the Haynies are famous in Virginia. They're known as the largest grain producers in the state of Virginia. Everybody wanted to meet them. So I was so delighted to meet PJ's father. And there was PJ. I don't know, it's been some time ago. You were probably in your 20s then. And he pulls up looking kind of like he does now in this huge combine. And he goes, you want to drive it? I was like, are you serious? This is a very expensive piece of equipment. And I remember PJ moved over to the side and he let me drive this huge combine. And I'm like, you know what? I have really arrived now. And again, the same sense of pride, the beauty in the operation, the genuineness. There's nothing like a farmer and a farm family. And you have to be around them to understand who they are and the commitment that they make. So I was bitten. I had no idea I would continue a career in agriculture, but I had an opportunity to become a dean of the College of Agriculture at Virginia State, and that's where the responsibility of leading a study on food deserts in 2010 landed on my desk. And people were so unaware of what they were calling them food deserts. And, you know, at the center of that work was partnership with Black farmers, because we realized that it was Black farmers that was growing the local food, to address food insecurity through farmers markets and other ways that they produced and made that food available. From there to the Commissioner of Agriculture's office, we took that work that we started in the early 2010 and launched the first program, the Virginia Food Access and Investment Fund. It was the first program of its kind to get the state government to invest in infrastructure to produce retail outlets in historically marginalized communities. And we had Black farmers at the center of that work. And even to USDA, a place I never thought I would land and arrive, Black farmers have been the center of my entire career. I'm proud of that. I feel honored to have been in this space, and I'm just delighted to have had that career and to be here today. So thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. PJ, what about you?
Oh, well, one, thank you for this opportunity to be here. I'm honored to sit here amongst these two distinguished ladies who I can easily identify as the baddest Black women in agriculture, ladies. So give them a round of applause, because you know, for the work that they've done, work that they're doing, I just commend them, because I know it's no easy road that we're traveling. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, PJ Haynie, I'm a 5th generation Black farmer from Virginia. My family hails from the coastal plains of Virginia, about 2.5 hours southeast of here. The tiny town of Reedville, Virginia, known as the area is known as the Northern Neck. And you know, I say there are probably 3 different points that have happened to me, three different things that have happened in my life that have got me to this place that I am today. And one goes back to as a kid. Uh, you know, I tell folks that my daddy tricked me into farming because, at 10 years old, instead of buying me a toy to push on the floor, he bought me the real thing. So on Fridays, when I got out of school, he had one of his farm hands in the parking lot to pick me up. I hopped in the pickup truck, and whatever field the crew was working on, whatever farm, he'd have my tractor in the field, fueled up, ready for me to jump on it. And if his crew was plowing, I was plowing. If his crew was planting, I was planting. So at 10 years old, I'm doing the same thing that the 40, 50-year-old guys on the farm. So that was one that really touched me. I really took a knack for equipment and farming, and I tore up more at 10 years old than I did work, but I really learned how to figure it out. The second point was in my college years. As I graduated, started off at Virginia State, transferred to Virginia Tech, and during that period of 95 to 99, my father was involved with a group of black farmers that protested on Washington and for what was known as the black farmer lawsuit, the Pickford versus Glickman black farmer lawsuit. And I traveled around the country standing in protests with black farmers at the Department of Agriculture here in DC, the federal building in Atlanta. I had the Haul the Mule around the country for my dad and John Boyd as they protested to find out the inequities of black farmers. And that resulted in the black farmer class action lawsuit, in which the U.S. Department of Agriculture admitted to discriminating against black farmers. And it was the largest class action lawsuit in the history. They admitted that on average, it took 30 days to approve a white farmer's farm operating loan and 120 days to approve a black farmer's loan. And the third event that happened to me was in 2008, 2009. I got a call from a gentleman who was with Monsanto, asking me to attend a Black Growers Advisory Council meeting. And I chuckled because I said, what I do is different than most black farmers. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, we're not in the produce business. We're a large acre row crop operation. 2/3 of our acres are double crop. We'll plant and harvest 7,000 to 8,000 acres a year. I don't know any black farmers doing what I'm doing. And when that gentleman said, well, there are going to be black farmers at this meeting your size and some even larger, I immediately stopped the tractor in the middle of the field. I said, you mean to tell me there are black farmers out here farming more land than we are? He said, yes, sir. I said, where are they from? And he started telling me about Tennessee and Texas and Alabama and Arkansas, Mississippi. So I said, sign me up, say no more. When do I need to be there? Because I need to meet these gentlemen. And fast forward, I walk into the Monsanto corporate headquarters, and there are 11 other black farmers seated around a table that I'd never seen before nor heard their name. And after we make introductions, there's Tennessee farming 9,000 acres of row crop, Texas 8,000, Alabama 6,000, Arkansas, Mississippi, Florida. I was speechless. So that led to the culmination of us starting a nonprofit organization called the National Black Growers Council. And ironically, that's our attorney that just walked in the door. So, the National Black Growers Council is a passion of mine, and it's a nonprofit that I chair and I advocate with other black farmers. So those three events. Oh, and as a young boy, that tractor that I'll go back to that story. I was saying about that tractor my daddy bought me and all his crew. We were operating. One evening, we parked that equipment on a farm. It was a new farm. My father picked that farm up from a landlord, largest farm in the county. We parked all our tractors that evening in a line. The next morning, 6 o'clock, we get back down. All that equipment is shot up. Windows are busted out. Tires are flat. That event put a fire in my belly, folks, that is still burning to this day. So those are the things in life that you never forget. Those are the things that puts fuel in your tank to keep you pushing on. And that was one of the events that really I still remember today. Thank you.
And thank you, Maya, for this wonderful opportunity. My name is Seanicaa Edwards Herron, and I currently reside in Maryland, but I am from the great state of Mississippi, and I too grew up on a farm. My dad was a farmer, as well as my grandfathers, and we have traced our lineage all the way back to enslavement. So for me growing up, ag was all I knew. I didn't know anything else. And for my father, it was very important for us to go to college. And being the only girl in a family of all boys, he was very adamant that I didn't go into agriculture. And because I have a bit of a rebellious streak, I was not going to let the boys outdo me. It seemed like they were having a lot of fun and they got to be with daddy all day. So I went to Mississippi State University and I majored in ag economics with the idea that I was going to go back to the farm and I was going to help and contribute. However, there was a slight change in those plans because once I got into ag econ, I said, oh, I want to get another degree. So I went and got a degree in ag business. And then from there, I went into academia and I worked in extension for the University of Missouri's commercial ag program. I left there and I went into the private sector because I wanted to know what was happening in the markets. So I trained to become a market analyst. So then I was like, oh, wow, this is wonderful. Like I was calling my dad and telling him all the stuff that was going on. And then I had this bright idea of, I want to work at USDA. I want to know the ins and outs of USDA, all with the intention of bringing that knowledge back to the community, to my dad, to other farmers. And one thing I noticed throughout my professional career is that more times than not, I was the only Black person in the room, let alone being a woman. And, I faced some very difficult challenges and I understood why my father didn't want me to go into agriculture. But again, it takes a lot to cause me to back down. So I charged ahead full steam. I went to USDA. I learned as much as I could. Unfortunately, in 2018, my father passed away. That was a turning point for me and my brothers, our entire family, as well as our community. 3 years after that, my mother passed away in 2021. So I transitioned out of USDA so that I could really focus on Freedmen Heirs Foundation, which is an organization that I founded to support Black farmers across the United States. And I really put my heart and soul into it because for me, it's about legacy. It's about the community that raised me, that I came from, and giving back to that community in meaningful ways, whether that means leveraging my connections, helping farmers to connect with buyers, doing market analytics, talking farmers through USDA programs, whatever it takes to bring a sense of understanding as well as bridging those gaps and helping to fill in the gaps where we know that, there has been discrimination, there has been systemic racism, and always looking at equity at the forefront of what we do.
I'd say, giving a hand to that. And one thing too, and Seneca, I want you to keep the mic. And I just want to, applaud Seneca because as of 2 days ago, it was announced that Seneca is a James Beard awardee, honoree,
Thank you so much.
which is fabulous and huge. And so I'm sending you the hugest hug. But Seneca, in the work that you are leading and even through just all of the conversations you've been having in your sector, we know Black farmers are underrepresented, owning less than 1.4% of US farmland. What bold, immediate actions are needed to reverse this trend?
That's a great question. And I'll even say, Maya, I think that number has actually shrunk. It's actually around 0.6% of total US farm acres, 5.3 out of 880 million. And sometimes the most bold initiatives are the simplest. So we know that land acquisition and access to land has always been or has continually been an issue for Black farmers. So when we're looking at it from the top down, we need legislation and we need the federal government as well as lending institutions to really focus on legislation around anti-discrimination and also having the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act passed in all states. We know that heirs property is a major issue within the Black community, and a lot of Black ag families have lost land as a result of heirs property loopholes. So making sure that we're looking at this from a legislative standpoint. But then if we look at the other side of the coin, there is opportunity when we think about alternative measures, meaning what other land back initiatives or land trusts can we create as investment vehicles to help new and beginning young farmers or farmers that already have land that want to acquire land so that they can have access to it in a more equitable way. If it wasn't an issue, we wouldn't be having this discussion today, but we know that it is an issue. And so we have to make sure that we are using targeted approaches and thinking outside of the box. Additionally, education is going to be very important. And I think starting with 1890s institutions that are already working with these farmers and already have students that are going to be our next ag leaders and making sure that those students have the access to the education that they need in order to help farmers going forward. And then lastly, I think, and I haven't heard a lot of conversation about this, but I really want to encourage folks to think from the standpoint of the private sector and philanthropy, there's a responsibility there because those investment dollars that are going into communities can be redirected to Black agricultural communities, Black-led organizations that are helping Black farmers to create these alternative land mechanisms or to fund fully these land trusts in order to facilitate a more equitable access to land.
Absolutely, and thank you. And PJ, I want to pass it over to you because you really represent the legacy of Black farmers who have been the backbone of this country's food system. What does it mean for America when Black farmers thrive? And what do we lose when they don't?
Well, I think for America and for Black communities, it means a sustainable platform where I, as a Black farmer or as a Black processor, I can source product from a Black farmer. That Black farmer is leasing land from a Black landlord. I can pay that Black landlord money and their children can reciprocate and benefit from the money off of that land. So land, it all starts with land because that's the one thing that we're losing and we can't get back. You know, I was thinking about the question you asked Seneca and all how we can contribute and what it takes. And my answer is pretty simple to even that aspect. If we protect the herd can grow. And when I think about the herd of Black row crop farmers in this country, ladies and gentlemen, it's small. Now, by show of hands, how many of you know a farmer in this room? A farmer, period. Black, white, green, yellow, anybody know a farmer? Okay. Now, by show of hands, how many of you know a Black farmer? Okay. Now, put those hands down. By show of hands, how do you know a Black corn farmer, a row crop farmer, a cotton farmer, a soybean, a rice farmer? See, that's the small herd. That's the small herd that I'm talking about. You see, if I was in DC and I had a home in the suburbs and on evenings when my family got on my nerves, I went out to the greenhouse and was a green thumb. And on Saturday morning, I get up and load my expensive SUV up with produce. And I go to the farmer's market and I put on my sombrero and get a stand. I am a Black farmer. And I support you. But down on the gravel roads where we operate combines and tractors and equipment, we're paying $800 a ton for fertilizer, $5 a gallon for diesel fuel, and $500,000 for a combine. I've got a different set of rocks in my pillow at night than the urban farmer. So when it comes to Black commodity farmers, ladies and gentlemen, it's the smallest herd. I can only name you less than 10 Black rice farmers in the country. I can only name you 2 or 3 Black sugarcane farmers in the country. I only know of less than 10 Black cotton farmers in this country. And these are the commodities that are grown far and wide all over these United States. You know, in the early 1900s, the government recognized that there was a limited number of bald eagles in the US. So the federal government started spending millions of dollars a year to protect bald eagles. They became an endangered species. And because of that investment since 1960, we now have over 9,000 pair of bald eagles in the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, there are more bald eagles in the United States than there are Black row crop farmers. Just a fact, so you know that. So if we could spend our time and our resources investing in the one thing that we all need, you see, food is the one thing that connects us all. Regardless of our age, race, religion, political affiliation, everybody in this room and everybody on Zoom right now, we all have to eat. There is no culture without agriculture. And if we could think about making sure the hands that grow the food are as diverse as the knees that are under the tables consuming the food that we grow, we would all realize that we got a lot of work to do and making sure there's equity in agriculture. Thank you.
Yeah. And there is no food without agriculture. Love that. No culture without agriculture. So Dr. Jules, I want to pass it over to you. And PJ, I would love for you to follow this up as well. But you both played a significant role on USDA's Equity Commission, a very, very much so historic initiative aimed at really identifying and addressing deep-rooted inequities within the department. Can you share what the experience meant to you personally and how your participation helped to really shift the national conversations about Black farmers in rural equity? And I have a follow-up part to that, but I'll ask that after you all have been able to respond.
To answer that question, it was an honor, but it was also a huge responsibility. You kind of can't imagine sometimes being a first. So I was the first Black deputy secretary in the history of USDA. Now, I don't say that for applause, and I thank you for that, but the responsibility that I felt in that moment, you cannot imagine, because I knew that I was the face, I was the voice that had to represent people who had not been given a voice to speak for themselves. And I just would stay up at night just wanting to make sure that I was a good steward of those voices. And so the Equity Commission, you know, I think about the executive orders that were signed on the first day of this administration, and then I think back to the executive order that President Biden, one of his executive orders was to advance racial equity and support underserved communities through the federal government. The Equity Commission came from that. That was the first moment that he emphasized that. Now, of course, Congress mandated it with funding through the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, but it was solely for the purpose of trying to, specifically with USDA resources, really hold USDA accountable for years of systemic discrimination. And I remember Secretary Vilsack, you know, he's pretty serious when he wants to be. He called me in the office, he says, "Deputy, I need you to get this right." And I said, "Oh Lord, I gotta make sure." But I knew I had to get it right anyway. It's interesting about the Equity Commission and the legislation behind it, because it was to really address historical and systemic discrimination across the board. Across the board. Now I want you to hold on to that, because you know, there have been a lot of responses to that. And that's what we did. We formulated a real solid bench of folks, including Mr. P.J. Haynie, who when you get him something in his craw, he's not letting it go. And we had representation from across the communities across the board. One of the co-chairs was Arturo Rodriguez. He's a historian in farm workers' rights. Just an incredible group of folks who had lived experiences of discrimination, who had had their hands on it, who had dealt with it. So we had 66 recommendations come forward. 66. The difference, because there have been tons of commissioned reports that have come out of USDA throughout history, the lawsuits, class action lawsuits, others. I think this was a reemergence of refocusing on this conversation and trying to put some accountability behind it, trying to make sure that there was something that actually stuck and this was not just another report that went on a shelf. That was the attempt. And it has landed differently with folks. There's some people who are like, oh, this equity commission, it's great. You know, we've been able to bring attention to this. Others are like, it's a shame that we had to bring attention to the historic racism that has impacted so many. And there were some Black farmers that called my phone because they weren't happy about it. They felt it was watered down in some aspects. I know there was a specific concern about the beginning when it gave a little bit of history and background about the impacts and negative impacts of years of systemic racism on Black farmers. They said, it's weak, it's too weak, go back again. We had to go back to the table and call it what it was. It's racism that has destroyed lives over years. And so I get that. I get that need, especially from Black farmers who have felt like we have suffered at the hands of USDA and the federal government in way more ways than folks can understand. But I am proud that we were able to make some progress because it applied pressure. And sometimes the application of pressure is all that you need to make change. So I'll pause there, and I know there's another part to that question, so I'll.
Yes, yes. And, my other part in building on that, Dr. Jules, is really thinking about the lessons learned and some of those insights that emerged. So, based on the movement, what insights or lessons emerged from that process that you think the broader public and our movement needs to carry forward? And what unfinished business still remains in the fight for true equity within USDA, beyond, and in partnership with others across the nation?
We got to continue to apply pressure. During the Biden-Harris administration, there were many Black farmers who were vocal about what needed to change. Let's not stop. Let's not stop. Just because we feel like we're in a situation where no one wants to hear us, don't stop applying the pressure, because we have seen some movement as a result of the Equity Commission. I think about some of the changes that happened with that pressure being applied. For example, the loan process with USDA was long and convoluted and difficult. Farmers' loan applications were thrown in the trash can. They were destroyed. I mean, there are farmers who have had experiences of going in local USDA offices to try to get a loan and had guns pulled on them. So that's real. That's not made up. But just trying to make changes, like changing that loan process, making that easier, because we had to first think about what within USDA we could change without having to go to Congress. So there were some internal changes. But you think of the results of some of the payments that have gone out to farmers. Now, I'm not going to say that's because of the Equity Commission, but it applied pressure. The payments for distressed borrowers, those who have been historically discriminated against, there have been payments that have come out. The pressure that was applied for the state match for 1890 land grant institutions that had not been paid over 30 years, there was pressure that was applied. So we don't want to stop with the pressure. Now, the way that we apply it may look a little different. We may have to partner with some other advocates, and we got other advocates now, because we got lots of folks that are feeling pressure for the first time. and they can understand what that feels like. So it's not just us alone. So I say to our Black farmers and other farmers, we gotta lock in, and we gotta continue to apply pressure to see what's happening with the Farm Bill, to see what's happening with some of the other things that came out of the Equity Commission, to see if they are gonna be changed, because they need to be changed. So I just say, don't give up, keep on the accelerator, and we're gonna continue, hopefully soon, to see some change.
Yeah, we gotta keep pushing and moving forward. And, you know, PJ, before I turn it back over to you, Seanicaa, I would love to hear, PJ, your just participation with the Equity Council Commission movement, and just hearing a little bit from your perspective.
Yeah, well, one, I was honored to be appointed by President Biden to the Equity Commission and serve along with Jewel, and another one of our Equity Commission colleagues are here in the room. Just glad to be able to continue relationships that that commission built. As we are all scattered across the country, we still realize that we still have a lot of work to do. But my dirty boots were at the table for a different reason. You see, I was there because I was able to bring a perspective from rural America, because what I see out my windshield every day is totally different than what most of you see. And when I went into that county office as a college kid coming home, and I learned that one of my high school buddies in FFA got a beginning farmer loan, and I went into that local county office in Warsaw, Virginia to ask for a loan. And that old boy sat back in his chair and asked me, why did I want to get into farming? He told me, I said, you in college, you got a good head on your shoulders. Why don't you go get you a government job? Boy, you don't need to get involved in farming. Look at how much debt your daddy's got involved in the farming. Now, he wanted to discourage me. And when I said, well, sir, why'd you give my buddy Ben a loan, and you trying to take me a loan? You trying to take away opportunities from me? He got all red in the face, and he sat back in his drawer, and he pulled his desk drawer out, and he had a pistol sitting right there. And he looked down at that pistol and looked at me and said, son, I think we're done with this conversation. So that is another event that really scarred me for really realizing that I don't want another young Black kid to ever have to face anything in life. I could have been a living George Floyd right in that office, in that USDA county office that day. Yet if I went out to my pickup and retaliated like I wanted to, but my daddy was there and had good sense to tell me to carry my ass on up, carry my butt on up the road, I knew not to resist. But what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, when we look at rural America, those local county offices that still have that type of attitude, there's no accountability. You don't make, you know, if you walk in a bar and a guy wants to be a bully to you, and he's the biggest guy in the room, wants to treat you like a bully, when you knock him out, everybody else gets the email real fast. So when you make an example out of some of these people who discriminate against these men and women that go into rural county offices, then they will know that it's not tolerated. And that was one of the concerns that I had from my position. There was no accountability. The people that I knew who had been discriminating against farmers out here in these rural county offices across Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Virginia, they're still there today. And you don't eradicate the problem unless you cut the bad out of it, okay? And that's one of the challenges that I had with the Equity Commission, and that was some of the work. The other thing is equality. I can show you in the South, Black farmers right beside white farmers, where the Black farmers are getting less than $100 per, getting $100 per acre more, less in subsidy payments than the white neighbors. Side-by-side opportunities because they were able to sign up in programs during the 80s at the crux of discrimination at USDA. And they were able to get their farms in these base acre allocations, so they're getting $200 an acre for cotton allocation payments or for rice allocation payments, and they aren't even growing that. And the Black farmers right beside them are only getting $50 an acre for soybean or wheat. This is today, ladies and gentlemen. These payments came out last fall, and they're still happening. It's been like that for 30 years. And what I'm saying is that $100 an acre gap on a white farmer and Black farmer side by side for 30 years, that white farmer received enough in subsidy to buy that land. So these are the disparities. And the last thing I'll say is the inequities of the past are still creating present day disparities. Because of what my granddaddy couldn't get and my daddy couldn't get, it means I don't have and I can't leverage. So these are the reasons we have to, like they say, keep their foot on the gas as far as the equity and it comes to agriculture. Because we are feeding a growing world.
7 billion people daily now, projected to reach 9 billion by 2050. And with more and more concrete and asphalt jungles of the world, that's less and less soil to grow food on. So we gotta keep staying the fight, folks. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. And staying in the fight. And, Seneca, I really want to pass it back over to you because your work really highlights the systemic gaps in access to markets. What would an ideal marketplace look like for Black farmers, and how do we build that ecosystem?
I want to start off by saying, as it relates to Black farmers, the system has never been designed for Black farmers to market easily to make a profit. And when we're thinking about market access and how to build an ecosystem, first and foremost, we have to talk about being intentional about working with Black farmers. That means large agribusiness companies, restaurants, food retail, CPG companies. There has to be an intentionality to build with Black farmers, to work with them, not tokenize them for photo ops and for new programs that come out that nobody asks for, but to actually build upon creating that relationship, and also with the intention of long-term partnerships or contracts. Making sure that there is that aspect of having a guaranteed buyer and not just a one-off deal or, oh, I'll buy from you this year and we'll see what we can do the next growing season. But actually having that contract in place, that's a risk mitigation tool, to have a contract. So that's first and foremost. I would say another important aspect of the market access piece is infrastructure. Across the South, you have a huge inequity in infrastructure. Farmers need to be able to grow their product and to move their product. But without processors, cold storage, transportation, mills, grain elevators, all of those things are not intact. And so that means that you have a problem and we have to fix it. Massive investment in infrastructure to increase the ability to even access the market. And so those are two areas that I see that have the most opportunity, but a lot of challenges. Because again, it goes back to, and this is me using my ag econ hat, it's an economic problem. You have to have investments in order to build the market out. And so that's what we're lacking when we go into Black ag communities, working with Black farmers. There is disinvestment in infrastructure, but then there's also the economic support or finances to transition to a different type of production or to help farmers to access it. That is not there. And those dollars are needed. And so where the opportunity lies, I think, I'm going to always take it back again to the private sector, philanthropy, and the government. Those three, as I call them, they have the ability to support, which is why I'm so glad that you both talked about the Equity Commission and the work that was done at the Equity Commission. And I want to encourage everybody in here, if you have not read the report, please do so, because there are talks about or notes about, accessing land, capital, and markets for underserved farmers. And it is very critical because from an overall perspective, farmers, they love to farm, but they also want to make money. They want to be able to survive. And so beyond market access, other things that we should focus on is farmers need a seat at the table. Black farmers need a seat at the table where decisions are being made. Also, we should think in terms of how do we facilitate the support that they need, each of us, not necessarily depending on the government or anybody else, but within our own communities, how can we support them? And then lastly, it goes back to the land piece. Capital, land, markets, they all go together. It's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? You know, you can't get one without the other. And so we need to make sure that we're protecting the land that Black farmers currently owned, helping them facilitate the acquirement of more land, and then keeping the land once they get it for generations to come to help build that generational wealth in uses such as collateral. When you're applying for loans, or if you need something else, that will be a form of collateral or wealth investment for the communities.
Love all of that. And, Seneca, I'm going to stay down here with you because we know at this particular time in our country, when we are experiencing a lot of change, how does your professional and personal journey intersect with this reality? And to that, what does it mean for you personally to be doing this work right now in this moment?
That's a heavy question. It's very heavy for several reasons, but I would say that given what's going on in the country right now, it brings to light, or it shines a light on how fragile it is when you have performative solidarity. After the murder of George Floyd, we had a racial reckoning in this country. And for a short period of time, it appeared as if we were seen. When I say we, I mean Black folks. We were seen. Black-led organizations were seen. And it was important to have our voices at the table. But in a few short years, 4, partnerships are being erased and undone. Checks were given and now checks are no longer being given. It's a very tough place to be in because what appeared to be solidarity and movement, now we see that it was all a fallacy. And so for me to continue to do the work, it is a no-brainer. Not one day in 2025 have I thought that, you know what, I can't do this work. Now, I've said it's hard. It's difficult. I've never been here to navigate it, but I don't have a choice to decide to step back in the face of, political changes, economic downturns. I'm still going to show up and do the work. Because for me, it's not just about being funded or speaking on panels, it's about legacy. As I spoke to everyone earlier about my father and how much of an impact he had on my life and the work that I'm doing now. So it's about legacy. It's about continuing to move forward. Now, what I do feel is at stake is if we don't continue to move forward and continue to apply pressure, is that we're going to continue to see more land loss. We're going to continue to see more inequity. We're going to continue to see a United States agriculture where wealth and economic opportunity are exclusive in the hands of a few people. And for me, that's not right. And so someone has to stand and has to be a voice of reason in this space that we're in right now. And I'm not just talking about myself. I mean, everybody on this panel, everybody that's in this room, because it's more than that. And we have to make sure that we are creating opportunities, even in the midst of challenges and fear mongering and a political environment that's not inducive or conducive for growth. We still have to be able to stand. And so for me, that's what I wake up to do every day, is to stand even in the face of the challenges, because I have hope that one day we'll get to a place where we can continue to move forward as we were prior to that. But I also want to note that we don't want any more performative solidarity. If you're going to stand with us, stand with us. And while some people are retreating, there are those of us, like each of us on this panel, that continue to stand every day.
Thank you. PJ, well, I want to pause and, just really, sit in, what you said and, leverage Seneca. And, I'm curious, PJ, to hear from you, just around this point and this moment in time and experience and journey and all of the moving pieces.
You know, again, my windshield is different than most. And as I travel, I flew in yesterday from eastern South Central Arkansas, the highest Black farmer and landowner populated county in the state of Arkansas. And when I look at the largest Black farmer in that county and the largest white farmer in that county, it's nowhere close. I couldn't take 10 Black farmers combined and be larger than the largest white farm in that county. And I can reciprocate that same across every county throughout every state in the whole United States, probably. I was talking to someone in Iowa last week. I said, can you name me a Black corn farmer in Iowa? No. Soybean farmer? No. I mean, I know one, but we don't exist in those other states. And as the owner of a Black-owned rice mill, the only Black-owned rice mill in the country, I see that there's no one else standing beside me in the meetings that I go to and having conversations with these CPGs and things like that. So where's a way we can create a vertically sustainable platform? And if we had a Black farmer in the center of the room and we surrounded that farmer with people that can support him or her, we give them, one, participation in USDA loans to get access to land, one. Participation in USDA NRCS programs to get access to improve that land, irrigation, precision leveling. We get opportunities to come in to put in value added to improve the value of what that producer is farming and take that corn from just regular corn to grits, for example. Then we get contracts from USDA to come back and buy that product back from that farmer. We get CPGs that come to the table. We get private equity. If we can surround this farmer with the right people, just as our neighbors have, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. We're just putting another spoke on it. But if we can do that, we can create success. Because the one thing, again, we got to have is food. And we know we're going to need it. And it's going to come from land that has improvements on it, that can have quality. Like Seneca said, there are no Black cold storage facilities for storing and processing, and there's so much to the value add. You know, in the rice industry, just an industry that I'm familiar with, rice is only grown in 6 states in the U.S. Arkansas is the #1 rice producing state in the country. And within those 6 states, there are 40+ rice mills all over the U.S., and yet there's one Black-owned rice processor. And you're looking at that right here. But I cannot name your Black corn processor in the whole United States. I cannot name your Black wheat processor, a sugarcane processor, a cotton gin. All these are the value add. Because when I graduated from college in 1999, I learned that 18 cents out of every dollar spent on food makes its way back to the farmer. The other 82 cents is between wholesale and retail. And that farmer has all the risks for seed to stalk and cow to calf, but there's more downstream value off the crops that we grow. We all are benefiting from a cotton farmer somewhere based on the clothes that we have here on our backside. But yet we don't contribute to that. So all I'm saying is when we start looking at the dollar spend within the federal government, our own communities, there's a lot of opportunities, but we have to bring everybody to the table to create something sustainable. Because if I can create a model that's successful, my children will want to come jump on that train with me, their children and nieces and nephews, and when we build a whole community up, okay? When we start talking about the 1890 land-grant universities, and you got a picture of my daughter standing in a rice field with a pair of rice boots on, and the kids that picking up that rice can say, hey, that Black girl standing in that field, this rice on my plate, they can connect the dots. We can't do that anywhere else. So I think there are opportunities, but we have to have alike minds around the table and around the room to create that opportunity for our future generations to come.
Absolutely. And Dr. Jules, I would love for you to respond to the question I posed, but then also, with your role at 1890s Land in participation and movement with land grant universities, would love to hear just the future movement and how your work and the work that you're doing with those institutions can be supported in this movement ahead.
You know, I feel like I have come full circle. I started it in 1890 on the bottom floor of the Extension building. Went all the way around the world, and I'm back at the 1890. I'm so proud to represent these amazing institutions. And most recently, I've had to educate people that 1890 land-grant universities are not diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Now, it's a shame that I have to educate folks on that, but that's the reality of where we are. We're not. 1890 land-grant universities were mandated by the 51st Congress of this country, and the reason that they were created was because the 1862 white institutions would not accept blacks into those universities. And so in the southern states, they created the 1890 land grants, same land grant mission of teaching, research, and extension. And such incredible work. These institutions graduate 117,000 students every year. I'm sorry, 117,000 attend. They graduate 33,000 or so a year. Educate the largest number of Black veterinarians in this country, large number of engineers, Black engineers in this country. Create economic impact and value at the state levels where they exist in the billions of dollars, and hiring people and educating people. These land-grant institutions have been the core behind the research and the extension outreach to advance Black farmers and small and medium farmers in this country. And we're very proud of this unique legacy that we have. 1890 land grants do research and work that if we were not there would not get done, in terms of health disparities, in terms of economic disparities, in terms of research in a multitude of fields. So I'm very proud. And I want to say to the young people in the room, because you are so valuable, you're so important to our history and what we do going forward. I don't want you to be afraid. Don't be afraid of all the things that you hear spinning in the air. First of all, we've been here before. This is not the first attack on anything that we're seeing right now. As a matter of fact, you see all these marches going on, and sometimes Black folks, we done march so much, we're not marching in some of these new marches. We've marched, we've done this before, and we have made it, we have survived, and we're better off, but we need your voices to carry us forward. You all are passionate, and you're outspoken. You're passionate about where your food comes from. You're passionate about climate and this climate and the environment around you. And you demand change, and all of that energy that you have, it's what's going to carry us forward. And so I don't want you to be afraid of policy work. And students used to always ask me, what's policy? It's such a fancy word. It's nothing more than rules and regulations that can make change. That's it. And if you start with what's immediately around you, where you see injustices in your community, in your city, in your town, and you want to say something about it, or you want to get some of your friends and you want to educate them about the inequities, and then you want to tell them to go vote, and then you want to learn and become an advocate yourself for an issue that you're passionate about, that's how you carry us forward. So we need you all. We want all that energy, we want all that passion, all the impatience that we need some impatience right now. We need all of that to carry us forward. We're leaning on you. And so as 1890 institutions, we're proud to be educating young next-gen leaders in the food and agriculture space. So I'm looking for you, and I want you to know that we are here to support you, and we're going to push you forward. Thank you.
Love that. I wish I had a pen. I feel like I have so many gems to note here. And speaking of voice, we want to. Before I get to my last question here, I do want to open it up for questions. So with our colleagues and friends who are virtual, we will definitely get to your questions, and our colleagues here in the room will be keeping track of your questions. So if you have any questions, Please be sure to note that in the chat box. And for my colleagues and friends here in the room, we want to open it up for questions. So any questions that you all have, I'll keep an eye on hands, but feel free to stand up, raise your hand. We're happy to take any questions at this time.
My question is, are there any examples of local movements that really have helped support Black farmers to be more successful, and it's not a federal or national program? Have you seen any examples throughout the country?
So the question in the room chats, for those virtually, has there been any local movements and practices that we have been able to see in documents that could be helpful for future leverage and movement? Is that, okay.
I could just start off. I talked in my opening comments about, and I'm just speaking from the state of Virginia, the Virginia Food Access Investment Fund. That was a fund designed for infrastructure investment, so you could have retail outlets in historically marginalized communities to offer culturally relevant, healthy food. One of the things that was put into that program when it got started at the Department of Agriculture was that there would be a percentage of food purchased from Black farmers. That's an example of when you create new programs, you bake in those opportunities, and that still stands. And so that is a market opportunity, and it is a way to get those fresh, healthy foods, but also put some money back in the farmers' pockets. And so not only was that a part of it, but we wanted to make sure that the investments in these retail outlets that went in these communities, they were culturally relevant and respected the community and raised the history of that community up. And a lot of the history in some of these retail outlets was the history of Black farmers. So there are multiple ways when you are creating legislation, when you're creating policies, you can bake in things because some of the discriminatory things have been baked in. So why not bake in opportunities as well? And so that's just an example at the state level that has been successful.
This was a very important question. I met you through PJ to James Plantation years ago. Thank you for great work. But she's talking maybe not so much state level. I think you're talking grassroots.
Yeah, I mean,
like Black Farmers Support Network, something like that.
something like
Grassroots.
that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, something that's grassroots. You know, like in the civil rights movement, we had students. They did the trip down south with the SCLC and with SNCC. African-American students, Jewish students, white students going down to make civil rights happen. I think that's where you're trying to get to, and I think that's very important. And if I'll say one thing, if we can leave here today with the idea that we create a Black Farmers Support Network, BFSN, then we would have had a great day. Because at the end of the day, it's all about deliverables. PJ and the Black Farmers, National Black Growers Council did outstanding work. Former Secretary of Agriculture, Virginia, now USDA or recently USDA, outstanding work. But we need to have a grassroots ecosystem that educates, that advocates, that produces. Without that ecosystem, you'll have a lot of silos, meaning the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. We are right here in DC, but I don't see any African ambassadors in here. We're right here in DC, and I know we don't have any of the 1890 folks over here as they should be, but I'll stop and I'll hand over. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe, for saying that. And I'm just thinking just through a similar effort, like Gabe was saying, the grassroots, I'll share an example. The National Black Growers Council, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to improve the efficiency, productivity, and sustainability of Black row crop farmers. I recently was on a call with a large CPG that said, hey, we're in the rice industry. We'd like to identify Black farmers that can grow a rice variety for us that we can package, bring it to your mill, PJ. We can mill it and have it grown by Black farmers and processed by a Black rice processor, okay? And then we can take that rice and promote it to our network. Very similar to the cotton program where Black cotton farmers that are part of the National Black Growers Council. Grew cotton, sold it through Targill. Targill sold that cotton to Target. And if you went into Target during Black History Month a couple years ago, you saw T-shirts that were designed by African Americans, and 20% of the fabric in those T-shirts were from Black cotton farmers. Recently had a conversation with Mars Candy Bar. They want to look at identifying Black farmers that can provide peanuts for their candy bars. Well, I said, Mars, Black farmers grow peanuts, but they don't process. There are no Black-owned peanut processors. When peanuts come out of the field, they go to a drying facility where they're dried, then they go to a shelling facility. So now we're combining, I'm bringing to the table the Mars Corporation, Black peanut farmers, ADM peanut, the sourcing opportunity that can dry and store and segregate those peanuts. So now, through these opportunities, we can create these platforms for identity preservation. So all this rice that came through this lot and these bags for this company were grown by Black farmers and processed at a Black mill. All these candy bars that are in this display have peanuts grown by Black farmers in those candy bars. Those are examples of things that we can do, create opportunity, because if we can create something for the future, then the future generations will get into it. As much as I love farming, ladies and gentlemen, the challenge with it is that today, as a commodity grower, I'm getting $4 a bushel for corn. 40 years ago, my granddaddy got $4 a bushel of corn. 20 years ago, my daddy got $4 for a bushel of corn, and I'm getting that today. And that's okay, but the challenge is that 40 years ago, my granddaddy's combine cost $60,000. 20 years ago, daddy's cost $150,000, and a new one for me today is $700,000. I'm no better farmer than granddaddy or daddy to sell, to double yield, triple yield, or even harvest more acres in a day to offset the value of that combine. What I've got to figure out, how can I get more value for the corn going through that combine? So instead of selling corn to feed companies that we've sold to for the last 40 years and that are grinding our corn and feeding it to chickens, we want to be able to take that corn and process it into corn grits. I want to take that corn and put it in a bag for some of these retailers that are selling feed. And that's part of the reason that we've launched our family brand of Haynie Family Foods, to capture more value for the crops that we grow. I was in the grocery store recently, and I was looking at the rice aisle, and I saw barley, pearl barley. And I don't go to the grocery store much, but I looked at the price for a little box of pearl barley, and it's more than we're getting for a 45-pound a bushel of barley coming off the farm right now. So the downstream value in what we grow, so again, going back to Seneca's point, if we can create opportunities for those farmers in those communities, for the processing value add, and then tie the CBGs to it, we have a system that's sustainable and perfectly set up for the future of growth of Black farmers.
So adding to what Dr. Bronaugh and PJ have stated, and also gentlemen here in the front row, is, there are grassroots organizations and things that are actually happening right now. So National Young Farmers Coalition, there's an ecosystem with Black Farmer Fund, Soul Fire Farm, Black Farmers of Color Network in the Northeast. They're bringing resources together and building out an ecosystem. We are working with organizations such as ESMC, Forum for the Future, as well as Black Soil Kentucky, on helping farmers in different areas of the country have access to those market resources. And then, within Freedmen, Heirs Foundation, the organization that I lead, we had a program that we created that was specifically towards creating and opening market access with Black farming communities, with agribusiness companies, and tracing that product, as PJ said, so that you can be able to have a sense of how much is processed by this particular organization or company. So those things are actually taking place. We probably need to do a better job of getting the information out there so that people can know more about it. But there are a lot of exciting things that are happening right now.
Great. All right. I know we have a lot of questions in the room, and
thank you all so much. It is good to be here. My name is Seanicaa. I used to work at USDA in the Food and Nutrition Service in the last administration under Stacy's leadership in FNCS. A lot of the programs we worked on focused on market access, specifically the local food programs, local food for schools, local food purchasing assistance. And a lot of that is being cut right now. Same with USAID, with food assistance for humanitarian purposes. How are Black farmers within your networks responding to some of those cuts or impacted by some of those cuts?
I'll start that off. So I'll say this, you know, it's affecting folks, it's horrible. It's affecting people all the way around. However, for a lot of Black farmers in the communities, they never really had those opportunities or those contracts through the federal government. Nonetheless, they continue to step up to the plate and to provide support, filling in the gaps where they can. And so although it is negatively impacting them, however, they're still trying to work through ways that they can actually connect, because now they see it, it's an opportunity. The federal government is not, they're not taking the stand, or they're not standing on the business of, you know, coming through on those contracts. This presents an opportunity for farmers that never had those opportunities before to fill in the gaps.
You know, the gap has always been wide between white farmers and Black farmers. And now that these things are taking place, it's just going to widen the gap and make a further fall for Black farmers, okay? You don't have a safety net closer to the feet of those Black farmers that are out there. When you think about the farmers that were supplying to those programs, USAID and others, and now that they don't have those isolated gravy crane contracts, that puts more of their supply back into the pipeline that I'm trying to compete against. So it's going to suppress the market than I currently have. That makes sense? So now I got more grain in the pipeline for the farmers that were selling grain that's going for USAID and export. They were over here selling those contracts. We're feeding the domestic market. Now that that's drawn up, all their grain is coming over here, and it's going to suppress the market that I'm getting. So that's the direct impact. Fortunately, we did have a USAID contract with our rice mill. We fulfilled that in 2023. And I had the pleasure of traveling with Secretary Bronaugh and others on an international trade mission. And that's something that the USDA Foreign Ag Service is doing a lot of. But we have to make sure these programs are equitable. You know, all the government spend in DOD right now, or Federal Bureau of Prisons for food, all those procurements, we have to make sure that it's a set aside for Black farmers participating. Because even the government, if they say we're going to spend out of this $100 spend, 30% or 25% is going to be with Black and women-owned farmers, that creates opportunities for us over here. Because some of those programs are federally mandated and still in place. But no one's being held accountable for that. They're not filling those gaps, no accountability. So I think if we just look at what's already in place, and what's gone is gone, sorry and unfortunate, and we just need to create work to make sure that, again, the small herd of Black row crop farmers that's here, we can protect them for the future.
And just an additional, foundation has been working with the Alliance to End Hunger, and they have been very much focused on that. And you mentioned the lack of participation because the contracts don't often go to the Black farmers, and that's why we need the infrastructure. Because for Black farmers, but now we have an opportunity to reshuffle. We got an opportunity to reshuffle, but to get ahead of the game, we're going to have to make sure that our farmers can aggregate their products, can bring them to the opportunity, can work together. And there's an opportunity that we could look a little different going forward. But now's the time to prepare for that so that we're ready when these contracts come available. Black farmers can compete for Arkansas rice, can compete and be ready for that. But there has been a huge impact on the world because programs like McGovern-Dole and all these other critical food programs are not there. They're also not there at the local food banks. So this is a local issue, but it's an international issue. And so again, we have to advocate to make sure our Black farmers are able to go for these contracts, but we also have to make sure that they're invested in so they have the ability to go for these contracts.
Yeah, so we will take a question via our virtual audience at this time.
Awesome. Just want to say there's some really good resource sharing happening in the chat. So you're impacting a lot of people that aren't even in this room, and they're talking about what you guys are getting into. So we have a question from actually the director of the Alliance to End Hunger, Eric Mitchell, and he's talking. He's been following along. A lot of amazing people in this online part. So he asks, can the panel talk about how climate has impacted Black farmers, and is there research being done to help strengthen Black farmers with the tools to be more resilient?
And if you can repeat the question into the mic, just so folks online could hear.
I thought that mic was, oh, this is way louder. Okay. Can the panel talk about how climate has impacted Black farmers, and is there research being done to help strengthen Black farmers with the tools to be more resilient?
Well, I'll shoot first. And fresh example, many of you saw all the devastating storms that have moved across the Delta and the Southeast the last few weeks. On my farm, across my farms in Arkansas, we got 8 to 11 inches of rain recently, all at one time. Now, we talk about how does it affect all farmers. Everybody has a challenge. But Black farmers who don't have precision level land and well-drained farms, some that our neighbors have used these USDA NRCS programs for drainage, for ditching, for irrigation. As a farmer, it's important to get the water on, but you also got to get it off. So the farmers that use the USDA programs and they have ditches all around their farms and they're getting the water off, they're not going to have much trouble. But the farmers who don't have precision level land and are still have water standing, they can't get the water off that land. And by not getting it off the land in time and not having a well-drained farm, it's going to delay you another month in planting. And when you delay your planting in the spring, your crop is going to succumb to the hot dog days of summer in August. You know, farmers like to plant corn in March or April. That way that corn will grow and pollinate before the hot dog days of August and summer get in here. And then the crop is on the downside of maturity. But if you don't plant till May and June, your corn is going to be pollinated in August, and it's going to succumb to the hot days and hot nighttime temperature that affect the pollination. So that's an example of how climate change affects Black farmers because we don't have the infrastructure. Now, let's flip that. Come to midsummer. It's hot. It's dry. It's July. We got 85-degree nighttime temperatures. I'm standing on one of my farms and I look to all 4 sides of me, and all my neighbors have irrigation, and I don't have it. Because my neighbors were able to get their farms signed up in these programs and to get USDA funding to put irrigation on their farm, and I don't, I'm twice as far behind because they're going to be cutting 60 bushel soybeans on their farm, and at $10 a bushel, that's $600 an acre gross crop they're going to have. I'm going to be cutting 20. So that's 200. So I got a $400 an acre gap just side by side because my neighbor was able to get irrigation and I wasn't. So climate change hurts us from both aspects when it comes to the row crop farmer, from delaying you in the spring to not having adequate irrigation and infrastructure in the summer. So it only widens the gap in the disparity between Black and white.
And also adding to PJ was saying is that everything that he outlined, there's a cost associated with that. So even adding in the cost of the impact of climate change to Black farmers, there's an economic cost and it eats into their bottom line.
Absolutely. And Eric, thank you so much for the question virtually. And I understand that we have a few more questions, but I also understand we're running a little low on time. And before we definitely close out for this afternoon, and it's been such an incredible conversation, I want to hear from all of you all just some parting thoughts. How can the Black farming movement become a broader social movement, one that unites health, land justice, economy, food sovereignty? The list and list goes on. So would love to hear some parting thoughts from each of you. And Seneca, I'll start with you.
Sure, that's a great question. I think they're all interconnected. So if we can help Black farmers reclaim the land, utilize that land to produce healthy food, to help them to increase their own economic viability, as well as supporting those in their community, attaching that to justice, that creates a broader movement. It's connecting all of the dots, and then that gives more pressure, as we said before, on the overall movement.
I think each of us have an opportunity to go back to our respective organizations and corporations, families, and have the conversation. Have a conversation about Black farmers. Have your own conversation with your family. Where's our land? Do we have any Black farmers that could lease our land? Do we have any neighbors that you know that you could support through any of that aspect? Because, even when we look at now in organizations, we're trying to be a supplier of rice to corporations and food service distributors. And then we're going to source rice from Black farmers that are growing rice. And those Black farmers that are growing rice are leasing land from Black families in the South. So that dollar spent with us here is going to reciprocate itself a couple of times in the Black community. Those are examples of ways that we can roll the tide to help people in our community, because there's something we're all going to need. But the biggest thing, I think, is to help spread the word. I normally don't take a lot of speaking engagements during planning season, but this is one that I wanted to get on the calendar. And the other one is, I recently was the keynote at the Manners conference in Memphis last weekend. And for those of you who haven't heard of Manners, it stands for Minorities in Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, the youth are my future, because one of these days I want to sit back and have my boots propped up and have some young kid going up and down the field that's going to help feed me, okay? And if I don't show the opportunities that agriculture has to make farming sexy for the next generation, then who will do it? So that's one of the things we do at the National Black Growers Council. We host a series of field days all over the country to bring individuals out to showcase the latest and greatest that agriculture has. You can bring your children, your families to see varieties of seed, chemistry, equipment, technology, what it takes to put food, fiber, and fuel for the world. So for those of you who haven't heard about it, you can look it up, nationalblackgrowerscouncil.com, go on our website. We got a series of field days going to take place around the country. I'm hosting one on our rice farm in Arkansas in August. Love to see you there to kind of just get a little dirt on your boots and show you what we do in rural America. Thank you.
I would say that, and again, I'm speaking to our younger folks in the room. I want you to understand the legacy of Black farmers. They are not historical relics couched in loss and missed opportunity. Black farming needs to be framed differently. Black farming is about health equity, because Black farmers produce foods that are beneficial to the health of the communities that they serve. Black farming is about economic advancement, especially in rural communities, because when you take a Black farm away from a community, there are loss of jobs, there's loss of purchasing power, there's loss of land that goes on for generations. Black farming is about land loss, and with the loss of land and that wealth, there's also a tie to negative mental health issues. There's a tie to a lot of legacy-related issues. So Black farming isn't just about a historical relic. Black farming should be woven throughout every aspect of our society, and that's why we need to protect our Black farmers.
And I think that's the message we want to end on. So I just want to take this time to thank each of you. It has been such an incredible honor to have you all today, for us to be centered in this conversation. So let's give all of our amazing panelists a hand. And for those who have joined virtually, I'm sending you hello and a wave. And thank you all so much. And we look forward to continuing the series. We will be sharing the recording as a follow-up. So thank you all so much.